Before the China that we know today, before a China with emperors and kings, before China's first dynasty, is the China of today's video. Hi, my name is Timothy and I want to welcome you to the Chinese Civilization channel. As an overseas Chinese, one of 16 million Chinese people living outside mainland China, I am curious and passionate to learn about my ancestry as well as my heritage, and so I put together this channel to share the knowledge that I have assembled with people who are interested to know about Chinese civilization. So if that is one of you, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and we'll journey together to uncover the Chinese civilization. In this video, we will journey to the dawn of Chinese civilization, beginning not with the Xia dynasty, but earlier. We are going to go back into the deep mist of prehistory when China was a wild, untamed world. From the earliest ancestors to Neolithic villagers, we are going to uncover a people whose legacy spans 5,000 years. Now let's begin not with the birth of a country, but the birth of a people. And so, let's get started. Discover the China of prehistory. Long before emperors ruled from palaces, long before dynasties carved their names into stones, and long before writing was invented to record any of it, there was something else. A quieter story, buried in the soil, hidden in bones, in pottery shards, in forgotten tools. A story not told through ink and paper, but through stone, earth, and time. This is the story of the dawn of Chinese civilization. It begins in an age we call prehistory, before the Xia dynasty, before the Shang oracle bones, before even the idea of China itself had taken place. It begins when the land was home to early humans who hunted, gathered, planted, painted, carved, and dreamed. In this chapter, we set the stage for the journey ahead. We will explore the distant worlds these early ancestors inhabited, the rhythms of life that carried them from cave to village, and the enduring traces they left behind. It is not simply a story of origins, but of identity forming slowly through generations of survival, creativity, and belief. The spark has been lit. Let us step into the shadows of the deep past before the first lights of civilization began to flicker. To trace the dawn of Chinese civilization, we must look beyond the boundaries of history into the ancient terrain of prehistory where even memory has no voice. Our first evidence comes not from temples or scripts, but from bones, stones, ashes left by early humans who once walked this land. In the southwestern province of Yunnan, in the year 1965, a discovery was made that pushed back the clock of human presence in China. Two fossilized teeth were found in Yuanmou County belonging to what is now called Yuanmou Man. These hominin remains are estimated to be nearly 1.7 million years old, the oldest known evidence of human ancestors in East Asia. They belong to an early species of Homo erectus, distant relatives of us all. These ancestors did not build cities or cultivate fields, but they made and used tools, mastered fire, and migrated across vast and difficult landscapes. Their presence marks the very earliest stirring of human life in Chinese soil. Further north, in the limestone hills of Zhoukou near Beijing, another remarkable chapter unfolds. This is the home of Peking Man, one of the most famous archaeological discoveries in China. Dated to between 700,000 and 200,000 years ago, these fossils, fragments of skulls, jaws, and bones, belong to a population of Homo erectus who lived in caves and braved the elements of the Ice Age. Peking Man's remains were found alongside tools of stone and evidence of fire-charred bones, burnt ash, even hips, revealing a level of adaptation and intelligence not often associated with such ancient ancestors. Together, Yuanmou and Peking Man remind us that the story of China does not begin with dynasties, but with survival. With footsteps in the mud, with flint in the hand, and with fire in the dark. These were the first humans in China, nameless, wordless, but never forgotten. They laid the first stones on which a civilization would one day rise. For hundreds of thousands of years, early humans in what is now China lived as hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, tracking herds, gathering wild fruits, roots, and seeds. Their lives were shaped by the rhythms of nature and by the challenges of survival. But slowly, over thousands of years, a profound transformation began to take place. Across the vast Chinese landscape, people began to settle, they began to plant, they began to stay. This turning point marks the shift from the Paleolithic or Old Stone Age into the Neolithic, the New Stone Age, a global phenomenon, but one that unfolded in uniquely Chinese ways. In this new age, the tools changed. Instead of rough stone flakes used for cutting, we see finely polished axes, hoes, and sickles, tools made not just to survive, but to cultivate. The landscape changed too. Forest clearings gave way to fields. Rivers, once just sources of water, became the lifelines of early agricultural settlements. The change was not sudden, but gradual, shaped by the warming climate after the last ice age. As glaciers retreated and rainfall increased, the great river valleys of the Yellow River in the north and the Yangtze in the south became fertile ground for experimentation. Here, our ancestors began to tame wild plants, millet in the north and rice in the south, marking the beginning of agriculture in East Asia. With food came stability, with stability came community. Early villages emerged, small clusters of homes, storage pits, pottery kilns. The first signs of culture took root, painted pots, musical instruments, spiritual symbols. This was more than a change in technology, it was a change in worldview. Humans were no longer just surviving within nature, they were shaping it. The land was no longer just something to hunt across, it became a home. And from that home, something extraordinary would grow. This is where civilization begins. Not with stone walls or royal bloodlines, but with seeds, soil, and the will to stay. Amidst the mists and mountains of Funan province lies a quiet cave, hidden in the limestone hills of Taoxian County. For tens of thousands of years, it sat in silence until a remarkable discovery brought it into the global spotlight. This is Fuyan Cave, where scientists uncovered a set of human teeth, unassuming at first glance, but profound in their implications. They belong not to Homo erectus or Neanderthals, but to modern humans, Homo sapiens just like us. These fossils, dated to around 80,000 years ago, are among the oldest known remains of anatomically modern humans in East Asia. Their presence in China challenges long-held theories about the timeline and direction of human migration out of Africa. Conventional thinking once suggested that Homo sapiens left Africa around 60,000 years ago, slowly spreading across the globe. But the Fuyan discovery pushes that timeline back, implying that modern humans reached southern China 20,000 years earlier than expected. And that raises even more profound questions. Who were these early people? How did they get here? Did they thrive or vanish? Did they leave descendants who contributed to the future populations of China? Or were they an early isolated wave that faded into the past? Fuyan Caves gives us no definitive answers. There are no tools or art objects, only teeth. and layers of sediments that whisper of ancient lives. But the site stands as a silent witness to one truth, that the land we now call China was already part of the human journey much earlier than we thought. It reminds us that human history is not a straight line. It is a web of journeys, encounters, and forgotten chapters. And even as we uncovered new clues, the full story remains just out of reach, hidden in caves, buried in soil, waiting for us to listen more closely. At Fuyan, we meet our distant kin, still unnamed but no longer unknown. From the highlands of Gansu and Shanxi, along the upper reaches of the Yellow River, comes one of the earliest and most illuminating windows into settled life in prehistoric China. This is the world of the Dadiwan culture, where a new chapter in human development quietly began to unfold, one that would shape the course of Chinese civilization. Dating back to nearly 5800 BC, Dadiwan was once a thriving Neolithic village. Its people were no longer wanderers. They had settled by rivers, built homes of rammed earth, and cultivated the land. They planted millet, the oldest domesticated grains in East Asia, tiny resilient seeds that could be grown, stored, and relied upon. Millet changed everything. It allowed people to remain in one place year after year, harvest after harvest. With food security came population growth, and with growth came the beginnings of social organization. The villagers built rectangular houses, dug communal storage pits, and created pottery with simple yet elegant designs. Archaeologists have uncovered not only the remains of dwellings and tombs, but also ritual spaces, hints that even at this early stage, spiritual life was beginning to take form. Some graves suggest a differentiation in burial goods, possibly marking the early stirring of social hierarchy. What makes Dadiwan so significant is that it represents the early heartbeat of northern Chinese agricultural civilization. The techniques and lifestyle seen here would echo down through generations, influencing cultures across the Yellow River Basin and beyond. But Dadiwan is more than a collection of ancient ruins. It is a symbol of humanity's leap from nature into society, from survival into culture. It marks the first true villages on Chinese soil, planned, shared, enduring. Here, in the shadows of the mountains, a quiet revolution was underway. People were no longer just shaped by the land, they were beginning to shape it in return. And in doing so, they planted more than millet. They planted the seed of Chinese civilization itself. East of the modern city of Xi'an, where emperors would one day rise, lies the remains of a much older settlement, Banpo, a Neolithic village frozen in time. Dating back over 6,000 years, Banpo is one of the best preserved archaeological sites of the Liangzhu culture, a civilization flourished along the middle reaches of the Yellow River. Here, in the heart of Neolithic China, we find a community already rich in structure, creativity, and symbolic life. The people of Banpo live in semi-subterranean houses dug into the earth and covered with thatched roofs, a design that offered both stability and insulation. The village itself was thoughtfully planned, with a central residential area, workshops, and even a defensive moat. These were not scattered huts, but a well-organized society with a sense of permanence. But Banpo is best known for its pottery, elegant painted ceramics adorned with geometric patterns, animal motifs, and mysterious symbols. These designs were more than decorative. They may have carried meanings, indicators of identity, clan, or belief, long before written language would appear. Among the most intriguing discovery at Banpo is the layout of its burials. Women were often buried with more grave goods than men, and in more central positions, suggesting a possible matrilineal society where lineage and inheritance were traced through the mother's line. While the evidence is still debated, it hints at a social order different from what we see in patriarchal dynasties. Banpo was also a place of industry. Stone tools, bone needles, and kilns reveal the villagers' craftsmanship. Spindle wheels suggest they were spinning threads, possibly weaving cloth, well before silk changed the world. What we see at Banpo is a fully functional society, vibrant with life, art, and identity. It reminds us that the roots of Chinese civilization were not only practical but expressive, full of ideas, beliefs, and communal memory. Before there were emperors, there were artists. Before palaces, there were painted pots. And here, in Banpo, the ancient soul of China quietly took shape. Long before Confucius spoke of harmony, before the first character was carved into oracle bone, there was Jiahu. Located in Henan province, the Jiahu site dates back to around 7000 BC, over 9000 years ago. At first glance, it seems like another early farming village. But what archaeologists discovered here was nothing short of astonishing. Jiahu was home to early rice cultivation centuries before rice became widespread in China. Its people farmed, fished, and hunted, but they also did something more. They fermented. Residue found in ceramic jars reveal a concoction of rice, honey, and fruit, an early form of alcoholic beverage. It is the oldest known fermented drink in China, suggesting that pursuit of pleasure, ritual, or both was already part of daily life. But perhaps the most extraordinary treasures of Jiahu was the bone flutes, delicately crafted from the wing bones of cranes, with carefully bored holes allowing for musical skills. Some of these flutes can still be played today. Their tones are haunting, pure, ancient voices that have echoed through millennia. These instruments are among the oldest playable musical instruments in the world. They speak of ceremony, communication, and culture, of a people who not only worked the land but sought to express something deeper. And then there are the symbols crafted into tortoise shells. Simple, abstract markings, not quite writing, but not meaningless either. Some scholars believe they represent a form of proto-writing, a symbolic language that predates the earliest Chinese scripts by thousands of years. Could this be the first steps towards the complex system of characters that would one day define Chinese identity? Jiahu gives us music, ritual, taste, and symbol. It shows us that culture begins not just with survival, but with imagination, with creativity, with expression. In Jiahu, we find a people not only living, but singing, carving, brewing, dreaming. This is not just a settlement, it is a heartbeat from an ancient past, still faintly audible today. As early cultures flourished along the Yellow River in the north, another vibrant world was taking shape further south. Large, wet, and fertile. Here, in the Yangtze River Delta, humanity was writing a parallel chapter in the story of Chinese civilization. This is the world of the Hemudu culture, located in present-day Zhejiang province, dating to around 5000 BC. While the north cultivated millet, the people of Hemudu were among the earliest known rice farmers in the world. They built their villages on wetlands where the land was soft and the seasons warm. And from this environment, they crafted a distinct way of life, adapted, sustainable, and sophisticated. What sets Hemudu apart is not just its agriculture, but its architecture. The villagers built steel houses, elevated wooden structures with thatched roofs, standing above the damp ground. These were not makeshift shelters, but carefully engineered dwellings designed to resist floods and protect from pests. Even at this early stage, people were shaping their homes to suit the rhythm of the land. Their tools and ornaments were equally advanced. Archaeologists have uncovered wooden farming implements, bone spades, and beautifully carved ivory and jade artifacts. Pottery at Hemudu was coarse but functional, often decorated with cord marking patterns and used for cooking, storage, and fermentation. Perhaps most telling of all are the cultural artifacts. Clay figurines, carved birds, and engraved symbols that hinted at a spiritual worldview. In burial sites, some bodies were interred with grave goods and placed in a fetal position, suggesting a belief in rebirth or an afterlife. The Hemudu culture reminds us that ancient China was never a single thread, but a tapestry woven from many regions and lifeways. The south was not merely a frontier, it was a cradle in its own right. Here, rice grew in the marshes, here, wooden homes stood above the earth, and here, in the misty wetlands of ancient Zhejiang, another flame of civilization quietly flickered into life. As Neolithic cultures advanced across ancient China, a new and striking civilization emerged in the lower Yangtze River region. It was refined, ritualistic, and remarkably complex. This was the world of the Liangzhu culture, dating from around 3300 to 2300 BC. Here, also in the wetlands of what is now Zhejiang province, we find a society that has mastered more than farming and pottery. Liangzhu was building something deeper: belief, hierarchy, and sacred art. At the heart of Liangzhu culture is jade, a material that would become forever linked with Chinese civilization. But Liangzhu jade is not ornamental, it is ceremonial. Carefully crafted and polished with techniques far ahead of their time, these jade pieces reflect not only skill but meaning. Two forms stand out: the chong, a square tube with a circular hole through the center, and the pi, a round disc with a hole in the middle. Their precise purpose remains mysterious, but their symbolism is unmistakable, possibly representing the earth and the heavens, the human and the divine. These were not decorations, they were objects of ritual power. Burials at Liangzhu reveal a society with clear social divisions. Some tombs are simple, others are monumental, filled with jade artifacts, ivory, lacquerware, and tools reserved for an emerging elite class. It is one of the earliest signs of social stratification in Chinese society. What's more, the Liangzhu people engineered large-scale hydraulic systems, dams, levees, and canals that managed water in a challenging landscape. These were not just villagers, they were planners, ritualists, and leaders. The Liangzhu culture is often seen as the spiritual precursor to Chinese civilization. Though it vanished mysteriously around 2300 BC, its legacy endured in the jade traditions, cosmological thinking, and sacred symbolism of dynasties to come. In Liangzhu, we see the first outlines of a civilization not only rooted in the earth but reaching for the heavens. This was no longer just survival, this was vision. As the Neolithic age matured, the rhythm of life across ancient China began to accelerate. Villages grew larger, social roles became more defined, and new challenges, warfare, leadership, protection, began to reshape society. In this changing world, a new culture emerged in the central and lower Yellow River region, the Longshan culture around 3000 to 1900 BC. Longshan is often remembered for its striking black pottery, thin, smooth, almost metallic in sheen. These vessels were not made for utility alone. They were ceremonial, prestigious, exquisitely crafted, using the potter's wheel, an innovation that marks a leap in technological sophistication. But Longshan culture was more than pottery. It was a social turning point. Here, we begin to see walled settlements built with rammed earth for defense. Fortified towns such as Chengcheye suggest growing concerns over conflict, control, and territory. The world was no longer peaceful. It was becoming competitive. Within these settlements, life became more stratified. Grades varied significantly in their richness, with some individuals buried with jade, pottery, and weapons, while others had little or none. Elites emerged, authority was consolidating, power was taking shape. Evidence of organized violence, burned buildings, trauma on human remains, hints at conflicts between communities. This was not yet a unified civilization, but a collection of developing societies, each experimenting with leadership, ritual, and control. We also see signs of proto-writing, symbols inscribed on pottery and bones, not yet true script, but edging closer towards the language system that would define dynastic China. The Longshan culture represents the dusk of the Neolithic and the dawn of political complexity. Villages were evolving into proto-cities, spiritual practice into state ritual, and informal leadership into institutional power. Longshan stands on the brink of society. It is the final step before the story turns towards dynasties, kingship, and record keeping. Here, the ancient Chinese were no longer merely inhabiting the land, they were beginning to govern it. And with that, the shadow of the first dynasty was drawing near. By the close of the Neolithic age, something profound was stirring across ancient China. The scattered villages of early centuries were becoming regional centers of power. Leaders emerged, not simply heads of households or elders, but figures of authority, commanding labor, leading rituals, and managing resources. These were the first signs of what we now call proto-states, early political structures that foreshadowed the kingdoms and dynasties to come. Archaeological sites like Taosi in Shanxi and Jiahu in Hubei bear witness to this transformation. Had Taosi, the sprawling settlement, revealed evidence of city planning, elite burials, astronomical observatories, and zones of restricted access, suggesting a ruling class distinct from common villagers. At Jiahu, massive earthworks and jade-laden tombs speak of centralized power and organized labor. In these places, we begin to see the outlines of administration, ritual hierarchy, and even conflict management. Walls were not just built for defense, but to protect the centers of power. Ritual objects, jade, bronze and ceramic were no longer shared equally but concentrated in the hands of the few. Alongside the archaeological record, mythology begins to whisper into the narrative. Names like the Yellow Emperor, Yao, and Shun emerge from legend, figures not tied to exact dates but embedded in cultural memory as culture heroes, moral rulers, and founders of order. Though their historicity remains uncertain, these legendary emperors reflect a growing longing for stability, lineage, and legitimacy, a sense that leadership should be inherited, institutionalized, and sacred. This era, the space between prehistory and recorded history, is a threshold. On one side, the world of independent villages and spiritual life. On the other, the rise of dynastic rule, written language, and imperial tradition. The dawn is breaking, and as the mist of prehistory begins to lift, the great story of Chinese civilization stands ready to be told, not just through stones and bones, but through names, dates, and chronicles. The Xia dynasty, long debated and long remembered, waits just beyond the horizon. From stone tools to black pottery, from bone flutes to jade chong, we have walked a long path through the silent centuries before China's recorded history. This is a story not written in books, but etched into earth and bone, buried in layers of time, and brought back to light by careful hands and tireless curiosity. We have seen how, across thousands of years, the scattered peoples of ancient China began to settle, farm, build, and believe. We have watched as their villages grew into centers of ritual, authority, and memory. And we have heard their voices, not through words, but through music, symbols, and sacred objects. This is not simply the story of a land, it is the story of a people. People who tame rivers, people who painted pots, people who buried their dead with reverence and looked to the sky with meaning. And though we have reached the end of prehistory, we have not reached the end of mystery. The first dynasty, Xia, sits just beyond this horizon. For centuries, its existence was known only through legend. But recent discoveries, palaces, tombs, and the ruins of early Tao suggest that the line between myth and history is not so sharp after all. As we stand at this threshold, one truth becomes clear. Chinese civilization did not begin suddenly. It was not born from conquest or decree. It grew layer by layer, side by side, through the lives of ordinary people who dared to stay, to build, and to believe in something lasting. This is the dawn of Chinese civilization, and from here, the sun will rise on dynasties, empires, philosophies, and revolutions. But the roots are already deep, in the soil of Banpo and Dadiwan, in the music of Jiahu, in the jade of Liangzhu, in the bones of Yuanmou and Peking Man, and it all begins with the human spirit. Thank you for joining me as I trace the dawn of Chinese civilization. This is Timothy signing off, but before I go, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like so that YouTube will show it to more people. And subscribe to the Chinese Civilization channel for more videos like this. Thank you and see you in the next video.